We got shenanigans in New Jersey, in the Canadian border. We've got a New Jersey-based gang of illegal immigrants charging $6,000 a head to smuggle illegal immigrants into the U.S. from Canada. Getting tricky. No longer southern border. We're going El Norte. Let's do this. Watch a little video. What do you say?
The brutal winter conditions are not enough to slow the surge of migrants crossing illegally from Canada into the U.S. Signs of desperate journeys mark the landscape. The issue has reached a point that Republican lawmakers say the Canadian border is a vulnerability.
But we do have an incredible number of people coming through that area. It's an incredible assault on the northern borders.
According to U.S. Custom and Border Protection, more than 109,000 people were stopped by agents in the 2022 fiscal year, crossing from Canada into the U.S. That's up from nearly 28,000 in 2021.
Where is the outrage? Where's the outrage?
This is a video from like a year ago. Now he's talking about the outrage. Where is the outrage? The outrage is here because Greg Abbott has shipped everybody from Texas to wherever they want to go sanctuary city-wise. So now we're talking about Canada as well, right? Where is the outrage? Well, yeah, that's happening.
Outrage, America.
These lawmakers argue too many border agents have been sent south to deal with the surge in migration along the border with Mexico, leaving northern communities understaffed, becoming new targets for human smugglers.
Criminals and the cartels, they adapt and they get smart.
And that's why we're reading today's story. This is a story of adaptation. All right, you blocked us at the south. Let's do an end route. We'll go El Norte.
They're one step ahead of us.
This is Joe Biden's border crisis. I haven't heard a question about what Joe Biden needs to do. We need to have a strong border security plan.
These Republicans see this as another opportunity to attack President Joe Biden's immigration policies, which is one of the favorite topics of the conservative voting base.
Frigid temperatures unable to slow the migrant surge.
See how it said conservative voting base? Now, and this is what the Democrats are afraid of, it's not just the conservative voter base. It's everybody. Because as we've stated, every state is a border state now with what's going on with, hey, you want to go to a sanctuary city? Which one? Chicago, D.C., L.A.? We'll get you there.
It's already getting plenty of play on right-wing media outlets, including Fox News, the most watched cable news outlet in the United States. While there is a border challenge to be dealt with, when an issue becomes heavily politicized, scoring political points often becomes the priority over finding solutions. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
What does your video sound like?
I mean, it's so funny. What is so wild is that I've been watching all these, we've got this legislature going on, right? Where $118 billion, a little bit of money for Israel, a little bit of money for a bunch of money for Ukraine, and, 18 billion or so to the border crisis. But what is so funny is to see people jump on board like Al Sharpton. Just now, he's talking about a border crisis. New York's talking about a border crisis. Chicago's talking about a border crisis because they're involved. Because Governor Greg Abbott from Texas has done a great job of spreading the love around to self-proclaimed sanctuary cities. And now they are recognizing, you know what? There's a border crisis. And then it is pretty entertaining. The right-hand side of things always says Joe Biden's border crisis. Biden's border crisis. That is literally what everybody is pointing at. A New Jersey-based migrant gang group is smuggling hordes of illegal immigrants into the U.S. across the Canadian border for a price of $6,000 a head, a new report reveals. Between $4,000 and $6,000 is pretty normal for a border crossing down south. Now, oftentimes the migrants come across and they will have paid $1,000, maybe $2,000 if they can afford it, but they're coming from somewhere in Central America, somewhere in South America, maybe China. That's the new big one. And $1,000 is for some of these folks, it's a huge portion of a year's pay. And so they come up with 1,000, then they still owe 3 or they owe 4 or 5, and they got to work it off, right? So they are indebted to the cartels for long periods of time. And no wonder we have so much fentanyl coming in through the southern border. And now you're going to see it through the northern border because they're literally just smuggling these folks in. You're smuggling people in. Why not throw some drugs in there? Have those people throw some drugs in there. Here, put this in your you-know-what, put it back in your backside, get it across. It's all good. It'll be fine. A New Jersey-based migrant gang is smuggling hordes of illegal immigrants into the U.S. across the Canadian border for a price of $6,000 per head. That's kind of a standard range, somewhere between $4,000 and $6,000 to get through the southern border as well. But you've got multiple steps throughout this process where you got to pay for boats, getting through this area, getting through that area, paying a fine to the Mexican police, paying a fine to the Mexican federales. Everybody's got their hand out. And if you don't have the money, you may be working it off in ways that you're not too pleasant, especially if you're a lady. I mean, you've got some crazy sex trafficking happening out there. Human trafficking. You watch the videos of migrants coming into Texas alone. There are groups they're not even teenagers. They are preteens. 10, 9, 10, 11, going in groups by themselves. How's that going to work out for some of those girls? I mean, no wonder we've got human trafficking just off the charts. The human smuggling gang took root after its founders were briefly detained and cut loose by federal immigration authorities. Doesn't that seem about right? All right, you're illegals in the country. Now you're going to smuggle other illegals into the country because you already got there illegally. And now you're just going to set up shop because you know that you have protected status as a, you know what, I need political asylum here because I need to work on a better life. That's literally what you need to say. And if you can Google it, you can look it up on TikTok. 60 Minutes just had a big special where you've got Chinese nationals that are learning via TikTok how to get into the U.S. They fly into Quito, which is in Ecuador, because Ecuador doesn't require a visa from people coming in from China. So they get in there. And then Ecuador, is not that far from Colombia. So you get there. When I was climbing down in Ecuador, I climbed Cotopaxi and the Elenizas. From the summit of Cotopaxi, you could look right in to the jungles, look down on the jungles of Colombia. So it's not a stretch once they get to Ecuador. All right, we're here. Let's go. The ringleaders, migrants from Guatemala and Colombia, snuck across the Mexican border and set up shop in the Garden State, running the lucrative scheme while dodging the feds, according to a report by the Daily Mail. While U.S. Border Patrol agents grapple with an overwhelming flow of asylum seekers from Mexico, the New Jersey-based gang has helped spark an under-the-radar surge in crossings along the northern border, the outlet said. Some of what you've got going on is just the evolution of this process. Some of this is people understanding, illegal immigrants understanding once they get into the U.S. They're not going to be told no. And even if they get arrested, even if they get busted, like our gang of, who knows how many in New York City, they beat down a couple of cops. They got out. They had and they just recently got rearrested in Arizona. They got out on zero bail and they jumped. They left. They took off. They left the area. And all New York City could say was, well, we did issue them a citation for a court date. They're going to need to appear. It's like, rightio. They know how paper tiger-ish the United States criminal system is, especially right now towards illegals. Because if you're in the asylum process, you've basically got carte blanche to do whatever you want because they're not going to deport you in so many of these sanctuary cities. You're golden. You've got that halo up on top, like my burned forehead from being in Mexico this past weekend. I hope you guys caught a live stream or two. It was a lot of fun going down there, but it was sunny. It was hot in February 3rd and 4th. It was hot. I got sunburned. First day I put on sunscreen. Second day, not so much. That's why we're where we're looking on the working on the tomato look. With the huge asylum seeker concentrations and with all those people crossing the border, and with the huge increase in the amount of enforcement that's going on in the southern border, we're playing whack-a-mole. That's literally what's going on. Greg Abbott in Texas has done a great job of securing the border as much as he can, but because you're never going to secure it. Even if you build the wall, there's always going to be a way to get around. But secure, Texas's border wall, Texas's border with Mexico is 1,254 miles long. Just Texas. So you're never going to secure that. But the pressure that Greg Abbott has put on the cartel to move them elsewhere, that's another significant thing that I think you're watching unfold right now. And one of the reasons I'm covering this, because somebody from Snohomish sent me an email and said, what about the Canadian border? Here you go. Here's that story. You know who you are, Snohomish. You have an option, a lot easier to try and get in without inspection across the Canadian border, said Philip Casanitas, a professor of immigration studies at the CNY. I don't know why I said new instead of N, but I did. Graduate Center. We got a graduate center. They've got to be telling the truth, don't they? The migrant smugglers are capitalizing on it, charging a hefty bounty to sneak immigrants from Quebec and into Vermont. Vermont, where are you guys going to send them? I think Vermont's got to be a sanctuary city. Super liberal, right? Isn't it? Isn't it Vermont? I believe so. Where scrutiny is much less intense because everything's focused on the southern border. And I think that's why people are thinking, hey, wait a minute. We don't hear much. We haven't heard much unreasonable news about the northern border, El Norte. And you know why? Because for the most part, even here in Seattle, where we drive up to the border, what is it? A couple hour drive? Going to Canada, going to Vancouver, BC and see what's going on. Of going to Victoria, you take a shuttle boat from here, the Vancouver Victoria Clipper. The border there is fairly secure. I mean, you go through the border crossing in Canada, wildly different deal than going through the border crossing in Mexico. It's just different. The Canadian border officials, they just run right up your ass. And I remember taking my kids to a baseball tournament up there, actually through the Okanagan in Eastern Washington. And I had a little bat that my son won for MVP or whatever it was. And the border official was just riding me. And I'm like, yeah, I got this bat. I told you I got the bat. Look at all the gear we've got, all the equipment. My kids are sitting in the back seat going, why is the guy hassling you, Dad? It's because they actually care about their border. Whereas opposed to where I got the sunscreen here in Mexico, I got it in Piedras Negras, which is across the border. Literally across the border, I walked with Darian, my producer. We walked over there and shot a live stream. Going into Mexico there. Had to put a bag with our equipment on a conveyor belt, goes through like TSA. I held up my passport and the guy behind looking through the camera, he barely even looked up and said, you guys are free to go. Darian didn't even have his passport out. We just walked in. There's this open door on the other side. Just kind of walk out and you're like, all right, I'm in a different country. They don't care. If you look like you're American, if you look like you're whatever, hall pass, guys. And on the U.S. side, walking back across the border, it's probably, I don't know, is it 3/4 of a mile bridge? It's a huge bridge. I mean, it's a big bridge. Maybe it's a half mile. I don't know. It's, whatever. I'm going back through the U.S. They scan your passport. So yeah, you feel a little bit better about that. But yeah, in June, Elmer Braun Galvez, allegedly a driver for the smuggling ring, was stopped by border agents in Franklin, Vermont, transporting 4 illegal immigrants, telling authorities he was paid around $1,800 for each illicit passenger, but was not charged, according to the outlet. I mean, why would he be? He's an illegal. He's in the country. We're not deporting these folks. We're just not. It's what we're doing. Last year, more than 10,000 migrants were busted trying to get into the U.S. from Canada illegally, nearly 5 times the 2022 figure. An indication of the massive rush across the northern border, the outlet said. I've heard that the figure in 2023 was 37,000 people into the U.S. No, you know what that number was? It was 37,000 Chinese nationals had come into the U.S. And that goes along with the 60 Minutes story that we just heard. And so somebody was asking me, well, where do you think they went? Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to say, right? Various different communities strewn throughout the United States. I know we have a huge Chinese population here in Seattle. We have a massive Chinese population here in Bellevue. West Bellevue, when the Chinese were trying to get their money out of China, they were parking it here in West Bellevue real estate all day long. So you've got an entire community that has just a ton of homes that are sitting vacant, kind of just like Vancouver, BC. And they went as far as, if you got a vacant home, we're going to tax you because, you can't just let your own real estate sit there. You need to be using it. It's like, since when do you get told how to use your own real estate? Since when is that a thing? Well, we're going to tax you. Two of the New Jersey gang's ringleaders, we've got Jean Reyna Perez, 34, and Victor Lopez Padilla, 35. They were finally arrested by federal authorities, but it hasn't stopped the flow of migrants, just like the guys that beat down the cops. I think it happened during my live stream. At least the story went out in the live stream this morning that those guys who beat the cops in New York City, they were arrested in Phoenix. Was it Phoenix? I think it was Phoenix. Yeah, somewhere there, right? Reyna Perez, a Colombian national, crossed the U.S. southern border in Texas in April 2022 and was released pending immigration proceedings. So you've either got immigration proceedings or you've got some criminal court case. And you know what? Who's showing up for those court dates? Oh, yeah, I'm here. Because, I mean, these folks aren't legal citizens. They came here illegally, and they're just kind of running around. A certain percentage of them are running around willy-nilly up to shenanigans. You've got shenanigans on the northern border, just a much smaller scale. But I think, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast, I think you're going to see much greater pressure on the northern border because it's an option now, right? It's an option. And when you're talking, if you're a bus driver and you're doing $1,800 or you're a cartel member, you're a coyote and you're talking $4,000, maybe up to $6,000, something like that, you're going to do it all day long because this is big money, big money. You think about, I was watching what was it? Oh, it was JLR Investigates down in Eagle Pass. He was north of Eagle Pass. He was in between Eagle Pass and just north of Eagle Pass. And he ran across a group of 42 illegals that were kind of all walking in this big pack. You think about that at $4,000 a pop? I mean, that's some good money to just basically get them generally where they need to go. There's no guarantees. There's no money back guarantee that you're getting into the U.S. These folks are risking everything, their lives. I mean, yeah, it's just the risk that they're taking is incredible. Reyna Perez, a Colombian national, crossed the U.S. southern border in Texas in April of 2022 and was released pending immigration proceedings. We already read that, but failed to check in. Here we go. Shenanigans, but failed to check in with authorities and was busted again in October of that year, only to be released again. Why are we doing this? What's the end goal here? What are we doing? Why are we releasing these people back into the wild? You know what I mean? Well, because with the current administration, this is how they're handling it. Customs and Border Protection is literally, and I talked about this in the live stream this morning, is literally acting like TSA. Hey, when you go to fly and you hand them your driver's license, they're going to take a picture of you. They're going to scan your driver's license. They're going to make sure it matches up. And, at that point in time, their TSA is able to clear you. But what happens with Border Protection is they take a picture of the folks with their ID, with whatever they've got, goes into a database, and then they're able, by the time that the migrants get taken from the wall or wherever they are to the migrant center, they've got the ability to say yay or nay as far as, moving them further, getting them a bus to wherever they want to go, whatever sanctuary city happens to be the destination that they're looking for. So, but failed to check in with authorities and was busted again in October of that year, only to be released again. Catch and release. That is what we're doing. There's a picture of a bunch of them, just all stacked up. I mean, it's the kids. I mean, it's this poor girl. I mean, they're probably coming through with their family. Man, this is a huge humanitarian crisis. And I blame it on the current administration. I blame it squarely on Joe Biden and his dereliction of duty. Because prior to Joe Biden, what were the numbers like of illegals coming in under number 45? Yeah, record lows. Because he talked nonstop about building the wall. That was his big thing. They enforced the remain in Mexico. All right, yeah, we'll see about getting you asylum, but you're going to be hanging out in Mexico while you do that. They did not use parole as a way to get these illegals into the country and just kind of scoot them along. So there's a multitude of ways that things have changed wildly between the administration from 2016 to 2020. And, calling this Joe Biden's border crisis, that to me is pretty accurate. Because he talks about, Joe Biden, our fearless leader of the free world, he talks about having the money, he talks about having the laws that he needs to enforce the border. Well, they're no different. No massive legislation has come out since 45 was in office. So all the tools are there. It's just Joe Biden doesn't pick them up because he's under that, well, let's let a bunch in and I'll probably vote for us, on top of, appeasing that far left, which wants to tear down all the border walls. That whole Black Lives Matter thing, take the borders, get rid of the borders, except when you're in CHOP and you've commandeered your own 6-block radius in Capitol Hill in Seattle. And then by God, you need borders. I mean, you got to put those borders up, just, on the spot, because otherwise somebody might come in and take your turf. Can't have that. I mean, it's so funny how the narrative just spins, when it's in somebody's favor. Oh, we need gates. We need closings. And what they did in CHOP is they literally, the city of Seattle Public Works, Seattle Public whatever, public safety, brought in big, traffic concrete barricades to quadrant off intersections. It's just ridiculous. Lopez Padilla, who is from Guatemala, crossed into the U.S. and Arizona in June 2019 and was also released pending future proceedings. Catch and release, parole, just let him go, let him work, it should be fine. Leaving him and his accomplices free to run the smuggling scam. Very enterprising, very aggressive. Hey, we want to work, just not legally. Shenanigans, right? These are the shenanigans that we're focusing on right now, because this is the stuff that is driving your average American crazy, because it's impacting them from the standpoint of resources that they might once have had are now being delegated to the illegals. And, average Joe America is saying, what's going on here? This doesn't make any sense. Why are we taking care of these people when we can barely take care of our own? Because homelessness, prior and during the pandemic, massive issue. Now that's been surpassed by illegal immigration and the Joe Biden border crisis. So, according to the Daily Mail, Lopez Padilla may have ties to jailed narco trafficker Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. All right. He got put in jail. He created his own prison. He got out. I mean, we've got that Guzman. That is a story, right? That is a story. And he's the alleged, no, he's not. He's incarcerated. It's known. Co-ringleader, making several references to the drug kingpin on his Facebook account. Man, not sure if I'd be bringing up, El Chapo on my Facebook account. That's, you want to be under the radar. Despite now finally being in custody, a third cohort identified as Guatemalan national Simon Jacinto Ramos remains on the loose and running the operation. Well, somebody's got to run it, just because all your comrades book it out, or they're, whatever reason they're going somewhere. Somebody's got to take in the money. Somebody's got to take in the 4K per person, right? Because Mexico is on Canada's list of visa exempt countries, migrants can head there for an easier route into the U.S. if they come up with the cash to pull it off, which is why we are seeing the Chinese nationals, because they have the ability, they have more affluence, they have more money, they can get into the country, they can pay their way. Whereas a lot of these folks from Central America and South America do not have the financial means to make it go. And oftentimes they put a down payment on their trafficking into the United States, and then they're going to have to come up with a solution to work it off. And that's why you've got so many folks, that, especially females, that end up in the sex industry. They get sex trafficked because they've got the ability to work it off. The guys, not as much. Guys end up running drugs, doing whatever. Yeah, it's a crazy world we live in. Presumably, some of them are entering legally on tourist visas. Oh, really? Are we going to go down that road? Okay. A handful. Business visas and any kind of legal visa, and then illegally crossing into the United States. They're getting into Canada. Nonetheless, the U.S. border with Mexico remains the most troubling center of the migrant crisis, with more than 2 million crossings illegally last year. I think when it's all said and done, it's somewhere around 2.4 million people. 2.4 million people. So that's the guts of this story, but I'm going to tie in a few things that, I saw down in not only Mexico, but also in Texas. One of the things in Texas is the highways going north out of border areas. They've got border protection guys. It's coned off. When you're going north, you got to pull over. You got to stop. So just as you get outside of Eagle Pass, you've got one of these, and those are there specifically to try and stop the flow of human trafficking, of sex trafficking, and of narco trafficking, like we're talking about, because there is just so much money that is, available to these cartels, and they can run it. They've been running it, and they will continue running it. This whole issue with Governor Greg Abbott in Texas, that's not going to stop the cartel. The cartel doesn't sit back and go, oh, you know what? One state has pretty much closed down their border. Yeah, maybe we should hang it up. What do you say, guys? Did we have a good run? All right, maybe we won't be doing any more of that, human trafficking, because, the moral side of it. No, they're going to say, all right, Texas is off. Let's go to Cali. Let's go to San Ysidro. Let's go to New Mexico. Let's go to Arizona. Let's go anywhere but Texas, because we're getting pushback. And then you've got YouTubers down there that are, hey, I see one over there. I see one. National Guard, come over, get these guys. It's like 4 illegals. And you're literally talking millions and millions. 2.4 came across the border illegally last year in 2023. 2.4 million. And we've got a border bill that's going to allow over 1 million a year. It's still an incredible number. And that's why there's no way that bill is going to pass. It's just not. And then you're going to have the Democrats whining that the grand old party, they shut it down and they don't want border legislation. They don't want border reform. Yeah, it's the Republicans that have been screaming about this for years. And you know what the response has been? Crickets. Because it didn't impact them. Now you've got Greg Abbott, and initially it was Ron DeSantis, shipping people out to wherever they want to go, sanctuary city-wise. Hey, you want to go to Chicago? I hear it's lovely there in the middle of the winter. You want to go to New York City? We'll get you there. You want to go out to LA? Hey, we can do that too. Wherever you want to go, we will send you, because it's much cheaper to do that than it is to house people here while they're waiting to get that work visa. Don't even think about them being legal for years. Although it seems like these folks get fast-tracked as well, whereas other and more normal people, I know of a lot of people looking to get into the U.S. and get a residency so they can have some permanency around where they work. They want to get a job. It takes years and thousands of dollars. And then you've got these jokers just, we'll come in through the northern border and we'll claim asylum and away we go. And that is literally what you've got going on. So expect to see a lot more border encounters, not only in Canada, but also New Mexico, Arizona, California. That's where the big uptick is going to be, because we're literally in the process of playing whack-a-mole. In Texas, the Del Rio sector, the whack has happened. They've cut way down on the numbers. So that pressure is going to go elsewhere. Does it go to the Canadian border? Absolutely. Because, you've got people that can get to Canada, no problem. And then, we'll bring you in $4,000, $4K. You betcha. We'll bring you in. I mean, what a crapshoot. Imagine your life is in the hands of a drug dealing smuggler. I mean, you'd have less faith in just about, it's a terrible scenario. And it truly is a humanitarian crisis. But the way I view it is that it didn't have to be. The current administration chose to go down this road. They chose this path. Because immediately after getting into office, they got rid of the Remain in Mexico policy. They started implementing the parole heavily. They stopped building the wall, even though they've since then, we already appropriated these funds to that purpose. Guess we better build that wall. Don't tell anybody. We don't want people to know that Biden is building Trump's wall. Remember when everybody just got so worked up and said, there's no border crisis. Those Republican governors down there, they don't know what they're talking about. They're just a bunch of crybabies, a couple of migrants coming across, never hurt anybody. I mean, you need somebody to, do all this tough work that white people don't want to do. So, no, now what you're hearing is, it's a humanitarian crisis. We need to do something right now. We need to stem the flow. It's a crisis. That's what you're hearing across left side media. And it's just kind of wild. It's just wild. Because so much of it is hugely inaccurate. The current administration could stop the flow in its tracks. You're never going to stop it entirely. But look at what Greg Abbott did. Current administration could do the same damn thing. But politically, they're not on that side of the aisle. They're not going to go there. But now it's become such a powder keg, this issue in the 2024 elections, that they're trying to do something. Biden is trying to rustle up support for, hey, we should put this through because, then I can get some money to Israel. I give some money to Ukraine, and then we have some money here. And, the whole thing is just politically driven. They have no desire to clean up the border. They're happy as a clam because they figure that all the illegals that come across, they're going to be Democrat voters. Because if you lived through the Trump era, you would recognize that Trump isn't the guy that you want in office. Anybody else, because he had that whole build the wall thing. And his numbers were incredibly low as far as illegal encounters at the border. Low, record-setting low, in decades after decades after decades after decades. And then we go to the stellar opposite, which is Biden's border crisis. And look where we sit with that. Now it's involving everybody. Everybody's involved because, your rec centers are getting shut down. Your elementaries are getting shut down. They're being used temporarily because you've got all these thousands and thousands and thousands of people in the country. And they're even being housed in airports, federal airport. Let's Go Brandon Johnson doesn't know what to do, to the extent that he's getting hospitalized because of his panic attacks. And you never want to laugh at the downfall of somebody else, but I mean, if you're not up to the task and you're getting a panic attack over your job, maybe that's not a job that you're truly cut out for. So keep an eye out on the northern border. Keep an eye out on California. Keep an eye out on New Mexico. Keep an eye out on Arizona. Now, Arizona has already been a hotbed of activity, but the big difference between what's going on in California and Arizona and New Mexico is that there's huge pushback from Texas. There's zero pushback from the areas I just mentioned. And that will become the story. All right. That's it for shenanigans today on the northern border. Thanks for being here. I'd love to have you as a subscriber. Hit that notification bell because we drop content daily. And then also hit the like button for this video. Thanks so much for watching. Really appreciate it. Appreciate all the support. I think we're at 116,000 subscribers. Let's go on our way to 200,000. Thanks for being there. We'll catch up with you in the next one. Bye for now.